Federal Reserve is not federal, it's a private bank. It has no reserves. It just types in numbers in a screen and then sends those numbers to another screen at another big bank. And then they show up on your screen, or they give you a loan and those numbers show up in your balance or in your account. It's all freaking numbers on screens. And then what they do, what the Federal Reserve actually is, it is a money printer. It prints money. Sometimes it just adds $1 trillion and then sends it to the other banks, and then they create loans and whatever, and the money supply just expands that way. Other times they do quantitative easing, where they go and literally buy assets on the open market to make prices go up, and it's more just like fake, phony numbers on a screen, not based on anything in reality. And what it does is that which you likely earn US dollars from your paycheck or income, as I do, and you also likely have US dollars in your bank account. This is what happens when they make more money, more dollars. Prices go up because there's now more of these chasing scarce goods and resources, whatever. And what happens is that inflation and these prices going up, the money that you're earning and the money in your bank account now buys less. Now, what's another example of being able to buy less? Well, when you get taxed, income tax comes out of your paycheck, you now have $200, $300, $500, $1,000 less dollars to spend, because that's just whoop to the US government. Understandable, right? You have $700 to spend. Okay? But this is where inflation is so sneaky and insidious. It's the same thing. If you have the $1,000 that you netted, and then you go to the store to buy stuff, but inflation has made the prices rise by 10, 20, 30%. Your $1,000 is now basically worth $700. Yet you have this $1,000, it feels like you have $1,000, but you're only getting $700 worth of goods due to inflation. It is the same thing as if I go in your bank account and I say, give me $300 of that $1,000, and then you're left with $700. You're like feeling so bad because you got robbed. This is what the Fed, the money printer, and all of the fiat banking industry, really, this is what they do. And who gets rich? Well, they get rich. They print money, they charge interest on the loans, and they get rich, right? Rich, wealthy asset owners get rich because usually inflation shows up in asset inflation. So a lot of times if you own assets, you do okay, the same, sometimes even better, because this highly desirable piece of thing went up in value and the market can't really correct it. And that's what inflation does. But if you're not an asset holder and you're middle class, income earner, or even worse, you're poor or living on, what's the payments every month? The fixed income, that's what it is. So if you're living on retirement income or fixed income, every time these banksters and these a-holes make more money and your purchasing power goes down, you can afford less things. You're poorer. You're poorer from what you're going to earn, and you're poorer for what's in your bank account. And I think that's about as simple as I can put it. There's probably a bunch of other analogies to understand this. They call it the silent tax because it's the tax you pay that the government doesn't have to serve you any jurisdiction, any law, any papers, whatever. You don't have to file anything. It just comes out. They just take it from you. Even our income tax has to kind of be mostly voluntarily paid. By the way, if you're a W-2 earner, there's a form you can file where you can actually not have your taxes withheld by your employer, and then you can be responsible for paying at the end of the year. I don't know the name of the form. It's like W47S or something like that. Find it on Google. You can get all your money and then figure out a bunch of creative write-offs, or just write-offs, just track your stuff. There's a lot of things you can probably write off, and then pay less taxes rather than defaulting to letting your employer hold a certain amount and the government gets it, and maybe they give you some back, maybe they don't, whatever, right? So the thing about inflation and why, when you really truly understand what inflation is and when you see it, it's very hopeless. And that's why Bitcoin is hope. I'm not going to really talk about Bitcoin beyond that. It requires study. It requires deep understanding of economics, the history of money, what money even is. What does that question mean? What is money? What is not money? What are different forms of money? What are weak forms of money, strong forms of money? What is fiat currency, etc.? It's probably 100 to 500 hours of research that's required to truly become a money Bitcoin maximalist, and I recommend it, everybody does, because you're going to see it's like the reserve currency of Earth. That's what it's going to become. So if all you do is buy a little bit and just as a hedge against inflation, it'll probably be the best thing, the smartest thing you've ever done. So I highly recommend understanding what inflation is, what Bitcoin is, how Bitcoin is not a hedge against inflation, it's actually the solution to inflation, and how every fiat currency dies. They all die. Most of them have died. They're all dying, and how that's not going to stop. And when you kind of understand all these basic first principles, you could say of nature even, right? You will look at and see Bitcoin as literally the only hope you have. Not shiny rocks, gold or silver, which are highly manipulated, and they keep making more of them. But the only thing that no government or markets or whatever can manipulate or take away from you or print more of, that's what Bitcoin is.